Hi guys, it's me, ChazzaHD, and welcome to the qualifying watch-along for the 2023 US Grand Prix weekend. Hopefully you guys are all well, no matter what time zone it is in your part of the world, or where you're from. Hope you're safe and sound, and you are ready to enjoy what should be a pretty good qualifying session. Normally qualifying here at the Circuit of Americas track is, a lot of the time, pretty good. And normally a race weekend here in Texas is pretty exciting. So, yeah, I think we are in for a pretty good weekend. Maybe, yeah, who ends up on pole and winning the sprint race, winning the race on Sunday, may be the same as usual, but it might be a bit more entertaining in getting to that similar result. And qualifying, as you can see on your screen, begins in just under 90 minutes time, and it is incredibly hot in Austin, Texas. It is about 34-35 degrees Celsius right now. It is probably just starting to drop as we get into the later part of the day. Local time, it is actually it's I think 2:30 in the afternoon, so it'll actually be getting to the peak temperature right about now. But when qualifying starts, that temperature will start to drop, but it is incredibly hot for this part of the United States at this time of year. I know Texas is a hot state, I know that, but yeah, compared to other US Grand Prix weekends, I don't remember it being quite that hot on any day of a race weekend, and it is going to be very hot tomorrow. Bit cooler on Sunday, but still it'll be over 30 degrees Celsius, so yeah, it's going to be another hot weekend for the drivers to contend with. It won't really have an effect, though, on the drivers probably until Sunday, which, of course, is a 56-lap Grand Prix. But we have had a practice session already so far today. It finished about an hour ago, and I will get into the results of that session in a moment. We can read maybe a couple things into the session, but given that certain teams, for whatever reason, did not do a proper quick lap, we can't take too much, in my opinion, from it. And yeah, we'll get onto that in a moment. But yeah, hope you guys are doing well. Plus, I just wanted to say one final thing. There is a poll running in the live chat, and I've asked you guys, who is most likely to challenge Max Verstappen for pole position today at the US Grand Prix? Will it be Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, Lewis Hamilton, or Charles Leclerc? Let me know who you think is most likely to fight Max for pole. I will let you know my predictions soon enough. But yeah, I think what I'm going to do is hide the timer and just get straight into it. So yeah, we'll just get into the results of practice one. Max Verstappen, no surprise, he ended up quickest. Bit of a surprise, though, that it wasn't, the gap between him and the rest, it wasn't as big as maybe we were expecting. Only a tenth and a half separating Verstappen and Leclerc in the Red Bull and Ferrari, respectively. I think Red Bull still comfortably have the best car here, but I thought the gap was probably going to be 0.2 of a second, or maybe a tenth and a half at least, better than it proved to be. But yeah, Max and Red Bull still overall looking pretty strong. And then good to see Leclerc having a good practice session. It doesn't feel like Leclerc lately has been that quick. He's really regressed in these last few races. I know he's had big frustrations this year with the car and the way it handles, but yeah, it feels like he's been very quiet, Leclerc, in the last few race weekends. And then you've got Lewis Hamilton third, Mercedes with their new floor looking, I would say, pretty good. Still definitely not on the pace of Red Bull, but a bit better from what I saw during the session than I think you probably would expect with the new floor upgrade. And by the way, we will get into those upgrades and the Haas upgrade as well, and the Aston Martin upgrade. 3 big upgrades this weekend. And then you've got Sergio Perez in fourth, Kevin Magnussen fifth in the new B car that Haas have. We'll see if we can keep that up in qualifying, with George Russell 6th, Albon 7th, very impressive from him, Carlos Sainz 8th, Hülkenberg 9th, and Pierre Gasly rounding out the top 10 for Alpine. And then the rest of the field, you've got Sargent, Ocon, Tsunoda, Ricciardo, and then Norris, I don't believe, did his best time on the soft compound tyre, so I don't think we can read anything into how he did. And then Zhou 16th, Bottas 17th, Alfa Romeo, not really surprising, they look so slow. And then Alonso 18th, Piastri 19th, and Stroll 20th. Aston Martin with both cars having big issues with overheating front brakes, and that's why they didn't do many laps in the practice session and were really struggling quite a bit. So yeah, those are the results of the first practice session. What can we take away from first practice? Red Bull still look good. Ferrari looking pretty decent, maybe a tad better than I expected. Mercedes looking pretty good so far after just the first session. Normally with Mercedes, it takes them a bit of time to build up to some strong pace. We don't tend to see this season Mercedes, coming out of the blocks with really good pace. So yeah, that's encouraging. Very encouraging, of course, seeing Haas F1, both cars in the top 10. Obviously, that is a bit skewed with, McLaren and Aston Martin having both cars outside of the top 10, but still, that looks good for them. Williams, though, very impressed by them having a car in the top 10 around what is a very bumpy Circuit of America's track, and you wouldn't have thought Williams would be anywhere near the top 10 really this weekend. So, yeah, impressed by that, but because it's only one session, it's not enough data, in my view, to really sit here and say that this can influence my thoughts going into qualifying and my actual prediction for qualifying. So I am going to stick with my qualifying prediction from last night's stream, the weekend preview. And here it is, the top 10. I'm going to go Verstappen on pole, Norris 2nd, Perez 3rd, Piastri 4th, Sainz 5th, Leclerc 6th, Alonso 7th, Russell 8th, Hamilton 9th, and Ocon 10th. I'm fully prepared to be wrong, especially when it comes to Mercedes. But again, it's only one practice session, and we have to remember that. And especially with McLaren and Aston Martin not really doing proper quick laps in practice one, it's still difficult to know exactly where people are outside of Red Bull, who we do expect still to be the absolute quickest team. So yeah, that's the prediction I am sticking with for this session. And I'll just go back to the results of practice one and just show the top 10, because I am going to get up on screen quickly the car upgrades that have been brought this weekend, because again, some very important upgrades have come to the cars and we need to get into it. So right, let me just quickly get this up on screen for you guys. There you go. And obviously Albert Fabrega updating F1 as usual with the upgrades. So let's go through them. Mercedes have got a new floor body and floor edge. We'll see the pictures of those in a moment. This upgrade, James Allison described as being very important when it comes to next year's concept, which will be different from what they've had basically this season. And it says, with the floor body, raised floor leading edge and subsequent tunnel roof reprofiling. And for the floor edge, it says extending the forward floor edge flap rearward. So an important upgrade, not anything gigantic. James Allison said he thought it'd probably give Mercedes 1/10 of a second. I think probably, yeah, 1/10, maybe 2/10 of a second at the absolute most. I don't think this is going to give them an absolutely gigantic amount of time, but it is important looking forward to next year. And then you've got Alfa Romeo, new floor edge. I think there's a picture of that we'll get into. And it says redesign edges of the rear part of the floor. Aston Martin, you can see lots of new upgrades. They've got a new... Actually, hold on. Let me just check. Is my mic working? Yeah, it is. Just making sure. They've got a new floor edge, new diffuser, new engine cover, and a new beam wing. For the floor edge, it's a revised floor edge geometry with a... Can't quite see what that word exactly says. Long something slot and outboard wing alongside. Previously, the wing was under the floor for the diffuser. Diffuser with revised side view expansion, I think that says. For the engine cover, it says bodywork is revised with a larger undercut alongside the revised floor edge. And for the beam wing, it says there's a new beam wing with revised profiles and incidents, I think that says, alongside the new diffuser. So, big upgrade for Aston Martin. This is probably the biggest upgrade they've brought to the car since that one in Canada where they had a redesign of the floor and the engine cover. So, yeah, good to see. But whether it will actually help, we are yet to find out because they didn't do a lot of running in practice one because of those brake issues. And then here for Haas, and you can see on the diagram, they've basically circled the entire car because it is basically a new car. New front corner, new floor body, new floor edge, side pod inlet, engine cover, and then the cooling louvers, they're just circuit specific. For the front corner, the front brake duct inboard exit has been updated with small geometrical changes. Floor body has been modified in the latter part of the diffuser. The floor edge, a new floor edge, and a new floor edge wing has been introduced in the floor design. Side pod inlet has been modified to work with the new floor edge design, and the engine cover together with the cooling inlet, the surfaces of the engine cover, the side pod, and the coke. Does it say coke panel? Has been revised. Basically, it's a lot more or a lot closer to the Red Bull design. That's what this Haas upgrade is. And then we've got AlphaTauri, who have brought a surprising amount of upgrades. I know AlphaTauri have the most wind tunnel time available to them, because when it was last reset on June the 30th, they were last in the championship. But I didn't expect them to be bringing so many big upgrades this late in the season, but good to see nonetheless. They've got a new floor body, floor fences, floor edge, engine cover, rear corner, and chassis as well. I won't go through it all, but yeah. AlphaTauri, I mean, it has been said that they were going to do this, but I think the reason they're doing this is actually, and you may say it's unethical, but I think it is kind of to assist Red Bull when it comes to the design of this AlphaTauri in the latter part of the season, because they have changed the side pod design compared to what it was like at the start of the year. And of course, we do know that AlphaTauri, I think they confirmed that, that next year they will be taking on a lot more parts from this year's Red Bull cars. So, yeah, they are having a massive change at the team. Right, let's get into some of these new upgrades if I can find a good starting point. And I think we'll start here. So this is the new Alfa Romeo floor edge. On the top here is the new one. On the bottom is the old one. So you can see here this raised part is, yeah, this is new compared to the old part, which was a lot flatter. So Alfa Romeo trying to gain a slight bit extra performance. This is only going to be worth probably like a tenth of a second at most, so it's nothing big. This is the Haas. So on the top here is the new floor edge, and you can tell that by the livery here on the side. And yeah, you can see here the raised part of the floor compared to on the bottom where it's a lot flatter than it was before. So a completely different floor design. And then with a side pod, you can see, well, not a great difference from this angle, but it is kind of a straighter run down the side pod from where the cockpit is. It's a straighter run down to the floor than it was on the bottom picture you can see here, which was a lot more like the Ferrari side pod we saw at the start of this year and also last year, which was a lot more bowl shaped. So yeah, really just copying Red Bull. And what's this? I think this is the very start of the side pod inlet, which is similar to the Red Bull. And you can see that here, again, it's a lot straighter here on the top than it was previously on the bottom. So basically, as this person in the replies to this tweet, it's basically just a copy and paste of the Red Bull car. This is the new Mercedes floor. So on the top here is the new one, the bottom is the old one. There are differences with the new floor compared to the old one. You can just about, if you follow the lines here, you can see the differences, but I wouldn't say it's massive. It's an upgrade, but it's nothing gigantic, which is why James Allison said probably be only worth a tenth of a second, maybe 0.2 of a second at most. And here is the floor edge here on the top, the new one compared to the old one on the bottom. So yeah, an upgrade, but not absolutely gigantic. I don't feel. And then if I scroll up somewhere, there should be the the Aston Martin. Here you go. So on the top here, you can see is the new Aston Martin floor compared to the one on the bottom. There is differences with the design, but it's not massive. Again, this is similar to the Mercedes, where it's probably only going to be worth a tenth, maybe 0.2 at the absolute best for the team. It's nothing major. And I think like Mercedes, Aston Martin with this design, they're looking forward when it comes to their development path. They're looking really forward into next year rather than looking at salvaging anything massively this year. And is there anything else? No, I don't think there is. So there you go. Those are the upgrades for the teams this weekend. And I'll just try and get the countdown back on screen as we have got how long to go. I think we've got 72 minutes to go. There you go. Hour and 12 minutes until qualifying begins. But yeah, those are the upgrades this weekend. And yeah, Haas, definitely the biggest upgrade. Mercedes and Aston Martin, decently sized upgrades. AlphaTauri, quite a few new upgrades for them. But really, it's Haas F1 we're looking at the most, because they will be expecting a massive jump in performance from such a redesign of the car. They'll be expecting at least half a second gain, if not 0.75 of a second at least, from that upgrade. So we will see whether it does the trick and puts Haas into a position where they're regularly fighting in the top 10 with Alpine, Aston Martin, maybe even in qualifying your Mercedes and your Ferraris. You don't know. We'll have to see when qualifying gets underway. But yeah, that is the upgrade. So let's now get into the teams, and let me just go through how I think they will do in a bit more detail in today's session. And yeah, hour and 10 minutes to go, so keep your comments coming in the live chat. Let me know, how do you think qualifying will go? Who are you looking out for in qualifying? How do you think Haas, for example, will do with those raft of new upgrades? And how do you think the top 3, top 5 will end up? Let me know your prediction for that part of the field, and I'll try and read it out if I can before we get into the session itself. But let's get into the teams, and we'll start with Red Bull Racing. Oh yeah, one more thing to clarify. Unfortunately, the pictures I will be showing during the watch along, and really from now on, most of the time, will be from the Qatar Grand Prix, because there's not enough pictures I could find yet from this weekend of the cars to be able to display on stream for today. But of course, for tomorrow, that problem will be sorted. Anyway, for Red Bull, I still think they've got the best car. I don't think they need to really worry too much. Max Verstappen, I think, will probably just be too good for the rest of the field in that Red Bull, which is probably going to be at least a quarter of a second too quick for the next best car. Plus, you'll have to, add on a bit of time for Max Verstappen, who is in unbelievable form, obviously, in 2023. And this is a circuit that Max absolutely loves. He's had so many great races here. Of course, he's won the last 2 races here, both brilliant drives. There was a couple races in his earlier Red Bull days. I remember 2018, where he came from, I think, 18th on the grid and was only a second away from winning the race. He's been on the podium here multiple times. He's always been super strong here at COTA. And even in his first ever race here at the Circuit of Americas, he finished 4th in the Toro Rosso in a very difficult, dry and wet US Grand Prix. So this is one of his strongest circuits. I don't see him being really challenged this weekend. Sergio Perez, though, had a good practice 1 session, only 0.3 of a second off in practice 1. And if we can keep it like that in qualifying, I can't imagine he'll be that low on the grid. He's probably not going to be any lower than 3rd on the grid if he's only 0.3 of a second away from Max Verstappen. So that is good, and it's really good to see, because I know certain people out there are more so keen to see Max have maybe a bit more of an exciting teammate alongside him, but I do like Sergio Perez, and we know he can do better than what he's done this season. So I'm hoping that he can show a bit more of his true skill, really. And so far this weekend, he is doing so. So yeah, let's hope Perez can keep that up. And like I said, if he does, then I think a top 3 in qualifying will happen for him. My prediction is 1st and 3rd for the 2 Red Bulls, which would be, I think, at minimum, what they're expecting in qualifying, even with Mercedes maybe looking a tad better and Ferrari looking a tad better than previously expected. And talking of Mercedes, let's go on to them now. And yeah, Lewis Hamilton, he was pretty competitive all the way through first practice, and he only ended up 0.2 of a second away, I think, or a quarter of a second away from Max Verstappen. And I know it's still, not that close in reality, and we know obviously Red Bull in practice sessions do tend to sandbag quite a bit more than other teams do. But that's pretty good, because normally after a first practice session, the gap between the Mercedes and the Red Bull is normally a lot bigger. And I wasn't personally expecting, as you could see with my predictions that I showed a few minutes ago, I didn't expect Mercedes to be that quick this weekend. I thought in the race they'd have decent pace, but I didn't think in qualifying they would really be that quick at all. And I didn't think they'd be really anywhere near fighting for, say, 3rd, 4th, or even a top 5 properly on the grid. So encouraging signs so far, especially with that new floor upgrade. But let's wait until qualifying when it comes to determining whether that new floor upgrade has actually given them an extra 10th or 2, or even more possibly, compared to their rival teams. Lewis Hamilton, good session for him. Russell, not so great. I'm still going to stick with, again, my prediction of 8th and 9th for the team. And I will stick especially with my prediction that Russell will out-qualify Lewis Hamilton. I know Lewis has a great record here at the Circuit of Americas. This is one of his most successful tracks. But as of late, really since the summer break, Russell has been quicker than Lewis Hamilton. We've seen that in Zandvoort, Monza, definitely. Singapore for almost the entire weekend, he was quicker. Japan, he wasn't as quick as Hamilton, I don't think. So Hamilton, had the upper hand there. But then Qatar, Russell was quicker. So, yeah, I think that form will continue. So expect Mr. Saturday to deliver on a Friday and get ahead at least of his teammate. And if the Mercedes is a bit better than I am forecasting, then maybe Russell can qualify in a very healthy, say 4th, 5th place on the grid, which would be a pretty decent starting position coming into the race on Sunday. For Ferrari, pretty good first session, but I don't think we can read a ton into it because, what do you call it? Obviously, it's only one practice session. Plus, one thing we do have to factor in is Ferrari have not brought any upgrades this weekend, and they are not planning on bringing any more for the rest of the season. And that might hurt them today, especially if the upgrade for Mercedes is working. And if it is working for Aston Martin, their new floor upgrade, it could really be a difficult day for the Ferrari team. I have seen certain people saying they think Ferrari are going to be actually pretty competitive in qualifying. But yeah, I don't think they'll be massively quick. They won't be terrible, but it'll be, for them, probably just bang average, and that's why I predicted on yesterday, and I'm going to stick with it, 5th and 6th on the grid, which wouldn't be awful, but it wouldn't be anything to shout about. And I am going to stick as well with Carlos Sainz out-qualifying Leclerc. Of course, remember, Sainz took pole position at this Grand Prix last year. Never got the chance really to defend that pole because of George Russell's axe into turn 1. But yeah, let's see what he can do, Sainz. Because in practice 1, he was quite slow compared to Leclerc. A few tenths of a second. I think it was basically half a second, if not more. He was slower compared to his Monegasque teammate. But yeah, if you're a Ferrari fan, do not be expecting anything really that special this weekend. Never mind today. At best, I think they're going to be the 3rd best team in this session. They could even drop back to the 4th best team and be putting in a performance similar to what we saw a couple of weeks ago in Qatar, which was pretty mediocre. For Aston Martin, hopefully their front brake overheating issues are not going to be crippling them like they were in first practice, because they weren't able to do a proper first practice. As we saw with Alpine in Baku in the first sprint weekend of the season, it can affect you if you don't have a smooth at all first session of the weekend. With Alpine, they had, I think, a double engine issue, if I remember correctly, and it completely screwed up the rest of their weekend because they couldn't set the car up properly and they couldn't get anywhere near enough out of the car to actually know where they were performance-wise. And I fear Aston Martin, maybe not as bad, but they will suffer with that to a degree this weekend. So yeah, we'll have to see how they do. I'm still fingers crossed that Alonso will have a strong-ish qualifying today. I did predict him last night to qualify in 7th. I will stick with it. But I will admit my hopes for that are quite a bit lower today after, those issues in first practice. So yeah, Aston Martin not looking good, unfortunately, whatsoever going into this session. And it's also a big issue for them, not just because of how it affects the weekend, but they've also not had enough laps to really understand how the upgrade is working on the car. So that's going to affect that as well, and possibly, completely compromise this weekend, meaning that the next time they'll really, or the first time, they'll be able to properly find out how the upgrade is working, and what setup maybe works best with it will be next weekend in Mexico. So yeah, we'll see if that really does hurt their weekend, having a unreliable first practice session, which I have to say, for Aston Martin is not really that common. They do tend to be quite reliable compared to other teams, such as your Alpines, for example. And the last front-running team we'll touch on before the midfield is McLaren. And yeah, I don't know this for sure, but I am pretty certain that both Norris and Piastri did not do a soft tyre run, a proper soft tyre run in practice one. So I am still very confident that McLaren will be the second best team. Not miles ahead of the rest of the teams like Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin, but I still think they'll have a 2 to 3 tenths of a second advantage, which is comfortable enough for what they need if they're going to have a similar weekend to what they had 2 weeks ago in Qatar, and then 2 weeks before that in Japan. So yeah, I think McLaren will be fine. Lando Norris, who is doing this weekend his 100th Grand Prix. Congratulations to him on reaching that milestone. I think will finish up in second and on the front row. Oscar Piastri, I am curious to see how he gets on, because obviously he's never raced here before. So let's see around what is let's be honest, it is a very tricky racetrack, very bumpy, and there are a lot of difficult corners, and physically it can be a hard race and just track in general for the drivers. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how he gets on here. But second and fourth is my prediction, and I am still pretty confident they will be the second best team here in Texas, really for the entire weekend. I'll just whiz through the rest of the teams. Alpine looked okay, I would say, in first practice. They weren't as quick as Haas, and even Williams were quicker, which was a big surprise. I am hoping that they can do a bit better than that, because if they were out-qualified by Williams at this type of racetrack, I think that'd be quite the shock. So, yeah, let's hope for Alpine's sake they don't put in such a poor performance. But, yeah, my prediction, I think, coming into the weekend was Ocon to get into the top 10 in qualifying. Pierre Gasly, I think, will be not too far behind. I don't know, 12th, 13th, something like that. Not too far off in terms of lap time. But yeah, I think Alpine, I'm still going to stick with them as best midfield team. The only team really that can upset that, in my view, is AlphaTauri, and also, of course, Haas, because of their big upgrade, which I really do hope gives them a real big boost up the field. It would be great to see, especially with this being their home Grand Prix. But I'm going to stick with Alpine, because I feel as though at the moment they've been a bit more consistent compared to teams like Haas and AlphaTauri in the last 2-3 race weekends. And I think they're a bit more of a reliable pick, let's say, compared to the others. For Williams, yeah, looked very good in practice one. I still don't think they'll be in the top 10 in qualifying. I would be massively surprised by that. And if any of the drivers did get into the top 10, that would be probably one of, if not the performance of the day. But yeah, I think Alex Albon at best will make it probably into Q2 and end up around 13th, maybe 12th at the absolute best. But yeah, top 10, I don't see it at all for Williams. And then Alfa Romeo looked pretty bad in first practice, which is not really a surprise. I had them down as being the slowest team this weekend, so I'm not surprised at all. Haas F1 upgrade looks good so far. We'll find out in this session just how far forward, or just how much pace they have gained with this new Red Bull copycat design, and I'm hoping it is a big gain. If it could be as big as McLaren's from, what we saw early in the season in Austria, where McLaren went from a real middle of the road team that was struggling to match teams like Alpine and even Williams in certain races, went from that to podium contenders and a team that was easily quick enough to actually finish on the podium. So that would be amazing if they did that. Don't think they'll quite do that, but if they can put themselves into a position where they're fighting for, and being in the top 10, and they're even fighting with Aston Martin, especially the Aston Martin of Alonso, that would be a good step forward. Not an amazing step forward. An amazing step forward would be if they were fighting, with Ferrari and Mercedes, for example. But it would be realistic, I think, if for them to expect to start getting cars into the top 10 again in qualifying at least. And maybe, as well, with this new design, it will help their race pace issues. We'll have to find out on Sunday. And obviously in the sprint race tomorrow. But yeah, this is going to be a very interesting session for them. And it will be the moment of truth for the Haas team. And if they can have a really strong session and maybe even get both cars into the top 10. Of course, remember in Singapore a few races ago, I think they got both cars into the top 10. If they could do that again, then that would really put them in a good position for the weekend and would put them in a good position to climb back up the constructors table before the end of the year. And also watch out for AlphaTauri. Obviously, this man, Danny Rick, is back in the car for the rest of the season. Of course, he cannot wait to get out there for today's qualifying. This is a place that he absolutely loves. But AlphaTauri, as I showed earlier, they've brought a few new upgrades. So they could be a bit of a dark horse in this session. There were a couple journalists coming into the weekend who said, and one of them was Albert Fabrega, who said, according to simulations from the teams, AlphaTauri could be about 5th quickest this weekend. Similar things were expected in Qatar and they didn't deliver on it, so let's see here whether they actually will deliver on that. So yeah, we will see in the session, but my prediction is they'll have both cars into Q2, and then Tsunoda or Ricciardo, I think, will be in 11th place, probably. Maybe 12th, but I'm going to say 11th for them, which is obviously just outside of the top 10, which would be, if they ended up 11th and 13th, I don't think they would really be able to complain too much. I mean, with them putting a raft of new upgrades on again, they probably will be expecting to get a car in the top 10, but it's not the end of the world if they don't, is the point I'm trying to make. So yeah, watch out for AlphaTauri. I have a decent feeling about them. They've been in good form in the last few races and really in the second half of 2023, even though they haven't really climbed up the Constructors' Championship. But there you go. Those are all the teams and drivers. And yeah, let me know in the live chat, what is your prediction for qualifying, as we've got nearly just over 45 minutes to go until the start of the session. Yeah, let me know in the chat. What is your top 3 or top 5 prediction for qualifying? And I will make sure to read it out if I can before we get into the session. But I just want to say quickly, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because we have got plenty more content coming this weekend covering the US Grand Prix weekend. Tomorrow night, I'll be live at 9:30 p.m. UK time. That's an hour and a half before the sprint race at COTA. And I will be doing a sprint race watch-along, which, of course, I did not do in Qatar. So make sure to join me for that tomorrow night. And then, of course, on Sunday night, I'll be live 2 hours before the race starts for the race preview and race watch-along. And we'll probably be joined by my co-commentator Niblo to take you through the action on Sunday. So yeah, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe for more content like this. And for everybody watching right now, make sure to smash that like button. 24 likes are on at the moment. Let's try and get up to, say, 30 plus or even 35 likes if we can in the next few minutes. But I think what I'm going to do, really, for the next 45 minutes is read your comments on or in the chat. So let's go through some of them and make sure, of course, to keep them coming as we get closer to the session. Hello to all of you. Um, Joe saying, "Is it me or Mercedes seemed quicker in practice?" They did. They seemed definitely a bit quicker, but again, this is the difficult thing with the sprint weekend is because there's only one practice session. It's difficult to know going into qualifying really how quick certain teams were in that practice session. You don't really get to know that until qualifying's over and done with. So yeah, we'll have to find out when we get through qualifying. And I know that kind of um, not knowing or not knowing as much as you would do on a normal weekend where we have 3 practice sessions is more exciting, but I don't think necessarily creates a better and more entertaining race weekend. It's more exciting, in the build up, but again, I don't think that necessarily makes for a more entertaining race weekend. Mickey saying looking forward to qualifying, should be a good one. Infinite says laughing my fucking ass off this guy's predictions. Well, put your neck out on the line and let me know yours, and then we'll see who's more so right. If I remember correctly, in the last 2-3 races, I've been pretty spot on with not all of them, but if you look at like the top 5, I've tended in the last 2 or 3 weekends to get it a bit more right than wrong. So yeah, I'm decently confident that what I predicted will turn out to be true, at least for the top 5. Let me find some comments here. Mickey asks, what do you think about the FIA trying to bring the €1 million fines for the drivers? Yeah, so if you guys may have heard of this in the last few days, basically the FIA have announced they're going to be not extending, but they're going to be making the maximum fine for drivers bigger, is what I've heard. And I think the maximum fine at the minute is €250,000, and from next year on, apparently it's going to be €1 million. I don't really know what it is in response to. Apparently, it's in response to Lewis Hamilton crossing the track when he wasn't given a signal by a marshal to do so, which I think he was fined for, I think €50,000, if I remember correctly. I think, to be honest, they need a bit more, probably a few more incidents to justify them increasing the maximum fine, because even though, what Lewis did from a technical aspect is not correct, because I think the official regulation is you're supposed to wait for a marshal to give you the okay to cross the track, and I don't believe he received that. At the end of the day, he was fine. He crossed the track. He didn't get hurt or anything, but it's more of a from what I believe, I think it's just a technicality, really. But if that's purely the only reason why they're now wanting to increase the maximum, fine that a driver can get, it is a bit silly. I mean, drivers, they earn a lot of money, but they not as much as people think. They're not earning as much money a year. Not all of the drivers are earning as much money per year as, some of the top footballers, for example. You do, of course, have your exceptions. Your Hamiltons, Verstappens, Alonsos, drivers like that will be earning an absolute shit ton amount of money. But your Joes, Sargents, Albans, Magnussens, Hulkenbergs, drivers like that are not going to be earning a shit ton of money. So, yeah, it's just unnecessary. I don't think it's called for. I don't think there's been enough cases where drivers have been fined, and in retrospect, they should have been fined a bit more. I just don't think there's enough cases where you could argue that increasing the maximum fine should be brought in. So yeah, in my case, not in my case, in my view, it's a bit silly. But I will also say that it's not as big of an issue as is being made out. I know a couple of the drivers have criticised it, and a lot of people have been talking about on Twitter in the last day or two, but it's not really that big of an issue at the end of the day. And also, if you don't want to get fined, then don't fuck up. It's as simple as that. So, yeah, I don't think it's as big of an issue, really. It's not like, if they were increasing the severity of the penalties you would get for certain things you did, during a race weekend, but it wasn't financial penalties. It was, getting rid of the 5-second penalty, increasing it to 10 seconds. I could understand a bit more of the reaction about that, but yeah, I will admit that I do find the reaction, a lot of it on social media when it comes to this whole fine thing, to be a bit over the top, because I don't think really it matters that much. Rebel says, what do you mean he can do better? He is number 2 in the Drivers' Championship. That's true, but he should not be only 30 points clear of Lewis Hamilton. He should be probably around 80 to 100 points clear of Lewis Hamilton. I think that is a fair expectation from Red Bull. And again, yeah, the position is fine. They, that position of second place is the absolute best Red Bull want from Sergio Perez, because obviously they've got Max Verstappen in the car, the only driver that Red Bull are going to push to the moon to be the world champion. But he's not, given that we're how many weeks away? We're like 6 weeks away, I think, from the end of the season. Sergio Perez should not be in a position where he's having to worry about maintaining second in the championship. He should have had it basically wrapped up, like a month or two ago. But he hasn't. And that's why there's been rumours that Red Bull, in view to next year, have given him an ultimatum in saying, you have to keep second in the championship if you are going to be at Red Bull next season. And yeah, we'll see if he can do so. But again, I get what you mean in terms of position in the championship, but there's, he should be doing it in a much more comfortable fashion. Mickey asks, would Max let Perez pass to help him get second over Lewis? No, I don't think that's going to happen at all. Simon Craglan, good to see you, mate, says, I really do hope that Ricciardo does replace Perez no matter what. It would be more exciting, especially if it was the Ricciardo of old. But yeah, we are yet to see if the Ricciardo of old is still with us. Kofi Dixon says Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton looks faster in practice 1. And I believe Lewis will have a great chance to win on Sunday. Well, that is quite the prediction. Mickey says Lewis got blocked last turn, so he could have gone faster. Yeah. I did see a couple drivers during the session get a bit held up. I don't think I saw the lap Lewis did to go ultimately third, but I'll believe you. But yeah, Mercedes, yeah, good session, but let's find out when our front shows what they've got. Simon Cragland has posted his prediction of Verstappen On pole, Hamilton second, Leclerc third, Russell fourth, Sainz fifth, Perez sixth, Norris only seventh. That is quite a surprise. Alonso eighth, Piastri ninth, and Magnussen in 10th. Mickey says McLaren, yeah, didn't run the soft tire in FP1, so my guess is they are trying to set the car up for race pace. Simon Cragland asking, who do you think is the better driver between Ocon and Gasly? Before the season, I would have said Ocon, but I think Gasly has performed slightly better than Ocon, in my opinion. It's really hard to say, because if you actually look at their head-to-head, I think it's the closest driver partnership on the grid. Their qualifying head-to-head is almost equal. And in the championship, they're very close to each other on points. I think it's only 2 points separating them. So, yeah, it's hard to say. I would probably still say Ocon, because I think he's had more good performances than Gasly. But again, it's really close. And in terms of viewing that battle, I think really, for me, I need to wait to the end of the season to give my proper view on that, because I want to see how they do against each other in the final 5 race weekends. But they have been very close this season, no doubt about it. Hello to Music Monster Man, by the way, in the chat. Mickey says Max first, Lewis second, Russell third. I think the Merc upgrades are looking good. Hello to Crystal Racing. Good to see you, mate. Michael Gott says Perez will probably win this weekend with him being under pressure. That would be quite something if he was able to do that. Mickey says Ocon was on fire last race. Yeah, last Grand Prix, especially the race, he was unbelievable, especially with him throwing up during the race and still coming home in 7th place. And let's not forget as well Singapore, which wasn't too long ago, where he probably would have finished in, I think it was going to be like 6th place, and his car broke down, and he was having a great race, mugged Alonso in the race as well by going right round the outside of him. Just trying to see if I can find any news on Twitter currently. No, can't see really anything. The last thing I saw on Twitter out of practice 1 was Alonso commenting on the issues that he had in the first practice session, which again, hopefully Aston Martin will get on top of that for the rest of the weekend. Sarah Gara says, for once though, if Alonso gets top 5 with Autosport, my head won't explode, lol. Let me see if there's any other comments I've not read out yet. Simon Cragland earlier saying the championship table doesn't tell the true picture around AlphaTauri. They have definitely had a better car than Haas. They just don't have the same peaks as Haas. Yeah, I see your point. I think a better way of putting it is they give themselves, AlphaTauri, too much work to do. When, if you look at Haas this year, you may not think it with them being second last in the championship, but Haas have got into Q3 so many times this season. But as usual, because their car cannot look after its tyres and it's just a poor race car, they rarely finish in the points. If they had the race pace that AlphaTauri have had this season, Haas would be easily 7th in the championship and wouldn't be that far away from Alpine. So, yeah, that's been AlphaTauri's issues. They've just qualified too low down too many times and given themselves too much to do on a Sunday. And that's why they've ended up ultimately with only 5 points, which to me, it doesn't feel like they've only scored 5 points this season, but that is the truth. They've only had 5 World Championship points. Of course, there were a couple races where Tsunoda was unlucky. Spain, where he was going to get a couple points. Monaco as well. But yeah, ultimately, they've been just too slow in qualifying. That's what their main issue has been. Michael Gott says, what happened to Aston Martin's early season promise? There is, and I will say this is a rumor because I don't think it's necessarily confirmed, and I don't think there is a overwhelming amount of evidence to suggest that this is actually why Aston Martin dropped off the pace. But according to them, or the rumor in and around Aston Martin, is that there was something on their front wing that when they upgraded the front wing in Spain, I remember, there was something on it the FIA didn't like and told them to, to redesign to fit with the regulations. According to Aston Martin or certain insiders, that had a negative effect on the Aston Martin car. I don't think it, well, I think it, if that is true, it probably did factually have a negative effect. I just don't think it had as much of an effect as they are trying to claim. I think it's probably a combination of that to a degree, but mostly a lack of development. I think what ultimately has happened is, of course, with Dan Fallows, the chief designer of the Aston Martin car, and he began that role last year. During 2022, he updated the Aston Martin design to be a lot closer to the Red Bull design. Then, of course, at the start of this year, it was basically just a green Red Bull. And I feel as though once he fully introduced that design concept to the Aston Martin at the start of this year, I do get the feeling that they didn't really know where to go with it development-wise from that point forward, which is why they haven't really developed the car that much, because I don't think they really knew what the next step was. Dan Fallows, of course, he had that knowledge from being at Red Bull in 2021 as to what the Red Bull design was going to be in 2022. Carried that with him. Again, introduced it with Aston Martin, which helped them leap up the field, but he didn't have that further knowledge of how to sustain it. That's, I think, when I say that, I'm not claiming that as fact. That's my guess, educated guess, as to why Aston Martin this season have dropped off so much. Next year, we'll have to see if they can really, step forward compared to where they are at this point of 2023. And they really need to, because if they don't really go forward compared to where they are now at the start of next season, then they're probably just going to be an upper midfield team in 2024, which would be very disappointing for them. But one thing I am going to do quickly, so we've only got half an hour to go into qualifying. We've flown by in this stream so far. I'm just going to post a link of the stream out in a couple places, and then I'll get back to your comments in the chat. So keep them coming. Keep smashing the like button if you haven't already. But yeah, let me just post this out quickly. So come join us here to Watchalong qualifying in Texas. As well, this is the first race weekend on the channel with my new, much more powerful and just better quality PC. So I'm hoping the images are more crisper, and the stream is better quality for you guys. Hopefully you are enjoying it. Yeah, let me just post this out on Twitter, and then we'll get on to the rest of your comments before the session. And of course, there's a poll running in the live chat. Let me know who you think are the 4 driver options I've put, who is most likely to challenge Verstappen for pole. Come join us to watch along qualifying at the US GP. So there you go. And yeah, we'll just get back into more of your comments, and I'll continue reading comments probably for the next, I don't know, 25 minutes, say. And then we'll get into the session. So yeah, let's get back to what you guys are saying. Simon Cragland says, haven't been on this channel for a while, so I may have missed some of your opinions. What do you think of the Russell versus Hamilton dynamic in the future? Well, it's getting very testy at the minute. It's difficult to say because obviously they did crash in Qatar, but Lewis Hamilton took responsibility. If he had not, and they could not agree on, the 2 drivers who was at fault for that accident, then I think it'd be pretty easy to see how that dynamic would go. Similar, but not maybe as bad as Hamilton and Rosberg at the Mercedes team from a few years ago. But because Hamilton accepted responsibility, it's difficult to say, because that might be the biggest flashpoint between the two. We don't know. You have to remember, we've had plenty of teammate battles in the past. Some, obviously, the most memorable, Senna, Prost, Hamilton, Rosberg, Mansell, Piquet. There were many flashpoints, and it just got worse and worse and worse. But there were some teammates and teammate battles where they did collide at least once, and the partnership continued to be healthy. For example, and one of these people I'm about to mention is actually on the Sky F1 broadcast right now, Jenson Button. If you remember, his famous win in Canada, of course, he collided with Lewis Hamilton. Wasn't his fault, but, they had that collision. It put Hamilton out of the race, but they continued having a great relationship, and they still do. So it might just be like that. It might just be, that's the flashpoint, and you may never see contact or any controversy between the two ever again. So it's hard to say right now how it's going to go. But I think definitely tensions will increase again, and will increase a lot more if Mercedes next year or the year after produce a car that can legitimately fight for the championship. Then you're going to see fireworks. But I personally don't think that's going to happen. I think Mercedes will improve next season, but I don't think Mercedes are going to be in a position of fighting for the title probably until 2026 at the earliest. So, yeah, hard to say, but I don't think it will necessarily be your next, again, Hamilton, Rosberg, Vettel, Webber, Senna, Prost type relationship. Let's find some other comments here. Do you think Piastri will beat Norris next year? I think so, says Simon. I'm going to say no. I still think Lando has the consistency in qualifying and races, enough consistency that he'd be able to do the job over Piastri. But I will admit, it is pretty hard to call that because we just don't know how much Piastri is going to gain from this year to next year. He will be better next year than this year, and obviously this year he's been amazing, but just how much he will gain, who knows? I think it will be a lot more even, but I think Norris, through consistency, plus the fact that Lando, his race pace is a lot stronger than Oscar's. I think Lando will still be the number one at McLaren in terms of results. Thanks for the effort, Chazza, says Sparky Pete. No problem. Just trying to see what other comments we've got here. Sparky Pete says Lewis just 2 years ago legitimately beat Max out. At the minute, he's beating George by over 80 points. So not at the peak, I don't know. But just a year and a half ago, he beat out Max. Max is a great driver. Well, yeah. Factually, he didn't. We know why. It was for a factually wrong reason why Verstappen ended up beating Hamilton. But I personally don't think Hamilton in 2021 was better than Verstappen. It was very close. They were both at an all-time great, unbelievable level. But I think Verstappen was the slightly better driver. But, as you say, Hamilton is 80 points clear of Russell, has had a great season, and he's not at his peak, but he's pretty close to it. But yeah, if start next season Mercedes have a car that is on par with Red Bull, Lewis Hamilton absolutely can win the championship in 2024. Will he? Who knows? Obviously, the first thing it depends on is if the car is quick enough, but we'll have to see. But and in my mid-season review, I did my driver rankings for the first half of 2023, and I had Hamilton third, I think, third best driver, and then Russell I had I think seventh or eighth. So pretty clear what my view is on how they've got on this year. Fine Existence says, I think Piastri's slower race pace comes down to his lack of experience in looking after the tyres. Probably, yeah. He will get better at that particular area, I don't doubt. Maybe still it won't be his absolute strong point, but yeah, I think he will improve on that particular weakness going forward. Michael Gott, could McLaren be a front runner next year after encouraging performance of late? Absolutely. The thing is, though, it depends on what your definition of front runner is. If it's a person who, or not person, a team that can regularly win races, probably not. But I would not be surprised if this, not this time next year, but if in the first 5-6 races of 2024, if McLaren were fighting and getting podiums, I would not be surprised. I am expecting a big improvement from Mercedes and Ferrari compared to McLaren, but yeah, I think McLaren, I don't think they're going to just fall away like Aston Martin have. I think they'll be still pretty good at the start of next season. but just not in a position really to win races. Let me see if I can find some of the comments here. Michael Gott says, will the Red Bull wind tunnel time hurt them next year, or have they managed them around it through alternative methods? Yeah, they've got through it absolutely fine. I think the wind tunnel penalty has basically ended in terms of the part of the year where it would actually affect them. So yeah, it's not going to affect them going forward. Of course, next year they will only have, I think, 70% wind tunnel time allocation for the start of, or the first half of next season. So they'll have a slight bit more in the first half of next season than they had this year, but it's not going to be anything massive. But yeah, over the winter, I am expecting Red Bull to still produce a very good, what do you call it? RB, will it be RB20 or RB19? Can't remember what RB we're on now with Red Bull, but yeah, their 2024 car I still think will be at least half a second quicker than the rest of the field. Let me see if there's any other comments here I can find. Bristol Racing saying, praying for a semi-exciting 2024 season. I think next year will be more exciting. It'll be more competitive, I think, for sure. But the end result, and I think I said this a couple of weeks ago in Qatar when I think somebody else asked, what are your thoughts going into 2024? I think, again, the teams behind will be closer, but the end result will be the same. Red Bull and Max are going to dominate the season. Not as much as they have this season, but they will dominate. And yeah, they'll do, they'll win the Constructors and win the Drivers' title. But as to who wins the races that Red Bull don't win next year, and let's say, because so far this season we've had 17 races, only one team has won a race other than Red Bull. Next year, how many teams other than Red Bull can win a race? We'll have to see. I would hope at least Ferrari and Mercedes can win at least one race, maybe even McLaren, but yeah, we'll have to see next year. But I think Max and Red Bull, as I've said, will still dominate 2024. Sparky Pete says 2021 was one of the best years ever. Sad it ended in controversy. Max was great. Lewis was great. But yeah, it is sad because looking back, it was the best F1 season we've ever had, the best championship battle certainly we've ever had, and it deserved a fair and square great finish, and that's not what we got. And obviously 2021 now is forever tainted by what happened at the final race, unless it somehow gets overturned in the future, which might actually happen, because of course Felipe Massa is trying to get the 2008 title overturned to him, and if he is successful with that, then I am 1,000,000% sure Mercedes will then put in a case to get the 2021 championship overturned. Michael Gott, who will be the F2 promoted drivers to go into F1 next year? Hold on, who will be the F2 promoted drivers to go into F1 next year, if any? Well, the grid for next year is basically wrapped up. The only seat or seats left to be decided is Red Bull, AlphaTauri, and Williams. Williams are unfortunately going to remain the same, I think. And then, yeah, if Sergio Perez loses his seat, then he probably gets replaced by Ricciardo, and then probably Perez won't even be in F1. He'll probably not bother going to AlphaTauri, who I believe will have a different name next season. And Lawson will probably come back for AlphaTauri in 2024. But looking towards 2025, we could see some very exciting talents enter the grid, because next year's Formula 2 grid is really shaping up nicely. Oliver Behrman, of course, who is a very special young talent, has had a good first year in F2, but next year is really the year that everyone is looking at with him in regards to him winning the championship and then coming to F1. You got Victor Martins, who's a very exciting French talent. And of course, the most exciting young talent outside of Formula One right now, Andrea Kimi Antonelli, we believe will be in Formula 2 next season and will be actually partnering Behrman at the Prima or Prema, whatever however it's pronounced, team. So, yeah, we could see some very special talents enter the grid in 2025 or 2026. Aline, do you think Leclerc will become world champion one day? At this point, I have no idea. Obviously, he's good enough to be a world champion, but he's probably gonna sign a new contract with Ferrari. Obviously, his contract comes to an end at the end of next season. Looking at it though, there's not really any options for him to go anywhere. Mercedes have got their two drivers tied down until the end of 2025. McLaren, their two drivers are tied down. Norris is tied down until the end of 2025. Piastri is at the team until the end of 2026. He's not going to go to Red Bull. He's probably not going to go to Aston Martin, especially if Aston Martin are not as competitive as Ferrari are. So, yeah, he's probably going to sign a new contract with Ferrari. I'm just hoping it's not as long term as the last one he signed, which was a 5-year deal. Yeah, I have no idea at this point. Absolutely no idea. He's what, 25, 26 years old. So by the time and when he does probably sign his new contract at Ferrari, it'll probably be a 3 or 4 year deal. And then by the time that deal comes to an end, he's going to be about 30 years old. So yeah, who knows really? But I do get the feeling that if he does stay at Ferrari forever, not literally forever, but to the end of his F1 career, then probably not. Crystal Racing says Massa is going to get compensation for 08, but no title trophy. They should have annulled Singapore, but it's far too late to act. Yeah, that's pretty much my expectation of the case. I think he'll just get it'll be just a settlement basically out of court where they just pay him a load of money to go away. Essentially, how much money he wants, who knows? Maybe he can't be bought at all. Felipe, maybe he's that set on the idea of getting the championship result overturned. But yeah, it's probably just going to be a compensation of many millions. Mickey says if Massa got the World Drivers' Championship, then Lewis would just countersue for Spa and try to get it back, and then the floodgates would open on all the other seasons. Yeah, I mean, Felipe, if he got the Singapore Grand Prix voided, then yeah, you're absolutely right. Lewis could then say, well, let's review Spa 2008, where Hamilton had a race win, wrongfully took away. And of course, Hamilton, what do you call it? He would have if he had won that race, then there wouldn't have been that exciting moment in Brazil where he, won the championship on the final corner, because he would have had the points anyway, even being behind Glock, if he had remained behind Glock. So, yeah. And remember, with the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix, Felipe Massa, if he is to win that championship, he needs the race to be voided. He cannot rely on Alonso's result being voided and disqualified. Because if Alonso is disqualified, Hamilton will actually gain more points from that race, meaning that Hamilton would actually end up 3 points clear for 2008 rather than 1 point clear. So that's what Felipe needs, is the Singapore Grand Prix voided to be champion. And then, the thing is, though, if Lewis countersued and then got back his 2008 Belgian Grand Prix win, I'm not sure that would actually be enough for him to still win the championship for 2008. Because it's 1 point currently in Hamilton's favour. If you void the Singapore Grand Prix, then Massa would be champion by 6 points, would it? Or 7 points? I think 7 points it would be. But then if you were to give Hamilton the win at Spa, Hamilton would gain 4 points and Felipe would lose 2. So that would be a 6 point swing, but that would still not be enough. And it would mean that Felipe Massa would still be champion by a point, I believe. So, yeah, it would be so... If they actually voided that race, it would be so messy going forward. But we will see whether that does actually happen. Yanni says in 2021, Wolf and Horner were both yelling and trying to influence the officials' decision. If they tossed out that last race, Verstappen would still win because he had more wins. I think if Mercedes were to actually put up a or take legal action to try and get the result, of Lewis Hamilton being champion, I don't think that is what they would pursue, getting the entire Abu Dhabi race voided. I think what they would do is they would demand that lap of lap 58 be voided, which technically speaking, the lap 58, which was a green flag lap, should never have happened. So the option would be to void it and just say it was a 57 lap race. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But we've got 7 minutes to go, guys, until qualifying starts at the circuit of the Americas. Get ready for what's going to be probably an exciting session in Texas, a very hot Austin, Texas, as we're only 11 days from Halloween. So yeah, before we get into qualifying, let me just quickly finish up the poll in the chat, where of course I asked you guys who is most likely to challenge Max Verstappen for pole position. 130 votes in total, and with 46% of the vote, you guys voted for Lewis Hamilton. Surprised by that, but there you go. Lando Norris second, 26% of the vote. Piastri third, 14%, and Leclerc fourth, 13% of the vote. But yeah, we're just a few minutes away now from the start of qualifying, so get ready. And if you have got any final predictions that you want to put in the chat, don't hesitate to put them in the chat right now, and I will, I've got the time in these final few minutes, read out a couple before we get into the session. And of course, it'll be the normal qualifying rules in this session. 18 minutes long for Q1, 15 minutes long for Q2, and 12 minutes long for the shootout of Q3. And let me quickly just check what the tyre compounds are for this weekend, because I don't remember seeing what they were. So the tyre compounds this weekend is the C4, C3, and C2. So they're decently soft tyres, which I'm surprised by, because this track can really hammer the tyres quite hard. And of course, it is a hot weekend as well. And the difference between the C4 to the C3 should be half a second. And then the difference between the C3 and the C2 should be, I think, also another half a second. So, yeah, the normal gap between the tyres in terms of time gained or lost from tyre compound to tyre compound. Greg Martinez says Verstappen on pole, Leclerc second, Lewis third. Michael Gott says Perez for pole. Darth Lord Raven says only a defect can challenge Verstappen. Prank says it's not hot in Texas. We call this cool, by the way. Well, I know, yeah, for people in the area, it's not that, not that hard to get used to. But trust me, if any of us Brits were over there, we'd be roasting. It'd feel like, well, July to us. As they're just going through on the screen the F1 intro. The absolutely brilliant track. And maybe in the future, I might come to this Grand Prix, because it is a track that I've always liked a lot. I know there are quite a few people out there that for some reason don't like this track, but I've always liked it. It's one of the best new tracks we've had in the last 20 years, as far as I'm concerned. And yeah, perfect weather. Not really any wind at all. And it is 35 degrees Celsius. Track temperature of 42 degrees Celsius. That's 107 Fahrenheit. Not as hot as Qatar, but still pretty hot. And it is, local time? About 4 p.m., I think, in Texas. Yeah, in a minute or so, I'll switch over to the watch-along screen. Nicholas says, what do you think about McLaren next year? Hopefully it's McLaren versus Red Bull, Team Verstappen, Piastri for the championship in 2024 or no? Yeah, I think you might be being a bit ambitious with that. It'd be amazing if that did happen, and I really hope it does happen, but realistically, I don't think McLaren have, at the minute, I don't think they've got the resources and a quality enough team to fight Red Bull for the championship yet. But they're maybe on their way there. So we will see. But I think 2024 is too early for sure. Yanni's saying, I like this track as much as I dislike Qatar. Michael Gott says, you might as well get Lewis to see the pit lane gravel for his title loss in 07. Yeah, it would just get ridiculously silly. And I mean, there was a big debate as of late in the Premier League in football as to, replaying a match because of a clearly terrible refereeing decision. And even though, theoretically, yeah, it's the fair thing to do if you were to replay a match in football, for example, for a poor refereeing decision, it would open up a can of worms, even though I don't think Liverpool necessarily were actually asking for a replay of a match. I think they were just saying it's never going to happen, but in an ideal world, they would like a replay. But it's the same in F1. From a fairness point of view, yeah, going back and rewriting history would probably be the fair thing to do, but I don't think it would be, in terms of, long-term thinking, I don't think it would be a great thing, to be honest. But anyway, let me hide that timer. And quickly, before we get into qualifying, touch on the championship standings. Max Verstappen, of course, your champion. Sergio Perez in second, only 30 points clear of Lewis Hamilton, who is only 11 points clear of Fernando Alonso in fourth. And then you got Sainz fifth, Leclerc sixth, Norris seventh, Russell eighth, Piastri ninth, and Stroll in 10th. And on the constructors' side, it is Red Bull, obviously the champions. Mercedes second, only 28 points clear of Ferrari. And then you got Aston Martin fourth, only 11 points clear of McLaren. Alpine in 6th, Williams 7th, Alfa Romeo 8th, Haas 9th, and AlphaTauri in 10th. And qualifying, guys, has already begun. We're about half a minute in to the session, so let me just get ready to get the timer on screen, and I'll sync it up at the 17-minute markers. What have I done there? What have I done? I don't know what I've done. For some reason, I think I've fucked up the text on the screen. It should say that, and I've now missed the syncing up point, so I'll do it at the 16-minute mark instead. But yeah, we are underway. We've got cars on track, and whilst we wait until we get to the 16-minute mark, let me just quickly get out my famous dotted line just to illustrate where the cutoff zone is. So of course, anyone below 15th place at the end of qualifying will be out of the session. So there you go. And I'll get the timer on screen in 3, 2, 1. And there you go. 16 minutes to go in Q1. So let's see who will make it through into the second part of qualifying. Logan Sargent, the home driver, of course, has started his first flying lap of qualifying, and you would imagine he is extremely likely to be knocked out in Q1 given his record in 2023. Let's see how he does for the first run. And by the way, just so you guys can keep track of it along with me, the best lap time of the weekend so far is a 1:35.9, which Max Verstappen did in practice 1. So yeah, just think of that lap time when it comes to these lap times we see in Q1 to really know who is doing a proper good pace or not. Sargent just coming up to complete the middle sector. The lap from him looks fine so far, nothing special. He's not making any mistakes though, which is good. Slight loss of rear end grip there through, can't remember which corner that was, I think turn 15, I think it was. As he's now coming up to the penultimate corner of turn 19. The exit here, of course, the corner to look out for track limit violations, and he comes back into the pits. So clearly he's not happy with the something in the car, balance of the car, I don't know. But he's back in the pits. And is pulling back in. So yeah, no idea what's happened there. But Zhou Guanyu is in P1. So let me just quickly update that. So Zhou is in first and Gasly is second. Not anymore. Valtteri Bottas is in first on a 1:36.8, which is a decent first lap. And they got Zhou second, Gasly third. Ocon is up in fourth, as Lando Norris does a 1:36.6 and goes quickest. So Norris up to P1. Then Bottas, Zhou, Gasly, Ocon, and then Stroll as Leclerc goes a couple hundredths of a second quicker than Norris. But yeah, let me just put Stroll up there. As Piastri goes third. And Sergio Perez is on a lap. He's not done a purple first sector. As Carlos Sainz goes fifth for Ferrari. There you go. So only 9 times on the board so far. As Sergio Perez, who has only finished on the podium here once before, which was 2 years ago in 2021, battled through, I think, a cold or a fever, or something like that, and still came home third. As he's just going through turn 17, 18, and now into the final couple corners. He has done a purple middle sector. And he did a 36.2 in practice 1. What is this? In Q1, it's only third at 136.6. So not great from Perez. But really not that great from anyone so far. But we've got half the drivers having done a time, as everyone is on the track except for Gasly, Ocon and Stroll, who have done a lap time and are already back in the pits. Here is Lewis Hamilton, who is going to do his first run in qualifying. Of course, Hamilton was on pole here, well, so many times in the past. The last time he took pole position, though, here, as he always loses the rear end a bit through the entry to turn 1 as Alonso goes up to 6th place. Yeah, he's had a great record here, but the last time he was on pole position for this race was 2018. And he hasn't actually won this race since 2017 as Hamilton. But yeah, it's have a okay lap so far, as Max Verstappen is a 136.4. which is half a second slower than he went in practice 1. So my guess is the track conditions are not really that great. It is very bumpy, this track, and it's proving to be difficult. As Hamilton is coming up to the middle sector point, he's going to be slower than Verstappen. Oh, no, he's not. He's a hundredth of a second quicker after the first 2 sectors. So despite that error in turn 1, looking good for Hamilton. George Russell about 1/4 of a second off Verstappen after the first 2 sectors. As Lewis Hamilton loses the rear end a lot through the entry of the penultimate corner of turn 19. Final corner looks okay, comes to the line, goes 5th, but I think there's definitely more time in that car, 2 or 3 tenths of a second at least more in that car. So a positive start for Mercedes, as Russell goes 3rd and actually does a quicker final sector by I think a 10th compared to Verstappen. So yeah, good start there for Mercedes-Benz. Is a replay of Hamilton at turn 1, and yeah, on turn-in, rear end stepped out. Hamilton, though, he does like the balance of the car, the setup of the car, to be a bit more looser on the rear end than other drivers, as a lot of smoke coming out of the front brakes there of the Aston Martin at a pit stop for new tyres. So clearly still suffering. There is Nico Hülkenberg in the massively upgraded Haas F1 car, has done a purple middle sector, as Alex Albon goes up to 9th. And we've got Logan Sargent now, who goes 15th. As here comes Hulkenberg. Where will he go? He goes quickest by a quarter of a second. What a lap by Hulkenberg. P1 for the Hulk. And then Kevin Magnussen has only gone 12th, which is very surprising. So let me just update that. Magnussen up to P12. And the only other drivers we're waiting on is Tsunoda and Ricciardo. Tsunoda goes 10th, which is decent. Ricciardo only 14th. So there you go. All 20 drivers have now done a lap time. And in the drop zone at the moment, as Ocon goes up to 3rd, actually, and Gasly's about to complete a lap, so I'll wait before I read out who is in the drop zone. As, oh God, yeah, Ocon is up to 3rd, and Pierre Gasly has gone quickest. So the track evolution is really massive, which is good to see. Pierre Gasly quickest on a 1:36.1. We still, though, have not matched the best time of the weekend so far, but it is Gasly from Hulkenberg, Verstappen, Ocon, Leclerc. Stroll is up to 6th place. And then you got Russell, Norris, Piastri, and Perez completed the top 10. And then Hamilton 11th, Bottas 12th, Alonso only 13th, Tsunoda 14th, Albon 15th. And in the drop zone, Magnussen, Ricciardo, Sainz, Zhou, and Sargent. Logan Sargent has had his lap time deleted for a track limit violation. As Carlos Sainz does a very good first sector, a purple first sector. So looking good for Sainz, who, of course, did not do a good first run. As Sainz now on the back straight. This is where the Ferrari should be at its best. As Carlos now brakes hard for turn 12. And that corner went pretty well. And yeah, this is a lot quicker. And this will probably put Sainz P1 this lap, with a purple first and second sector, as he comes out of turn 15, now through the flat out turn 16, 17, 18, and then into the final two corners. And Leclerc goes quickest for Ferrari by 0.04 of a second. Here comes his teammate, though, who got pole here last year and goes 0.3 of a second quicker and does the quickest lap of the weekend so far, a 1:35.8. So it is a Ferrari 1-2 with 5 minutes to go in Q1. So in the drop zone now, Albon, Magnussen, Ricciardo, Zhou, Sargent, as here's a replay of Sainz into turn 4, is it? Just a replay of him through the S's in the first sector. And yeah, looks decent, nothing special. But he is quickest for now. As, of course, Sainz has had a pretty good second half of the season. Last couple races have not been great, which haven't really been his fault. But yeah, he's really stepped up in the second half of the season. Of course, got that amazing win in Singapore, which is definitely still one of the drives of the season. Arguably the best drive of the season. But yeah, a lot of people on an outlap, and we're just waiting to see what the next load of improvements will bring us and who will end up out of Q1. I think Albon can get out of Q1, but it will be still difficult because Williams are not looking very quick. Surely Magnussen and Ricciardo in 17th and 18th can do better. And for Zhou, I mean, as well, he's 0.4 of a second away, Zhou, from getting into Q2. I would not be shocked at all if he was eliminated in Q1. So Magnussen and Ricciardo, I think, are the drivers in the drop zone to look out for in terms of people to get out of the drop zone, as here is the Red Bull of Max Verstappen. Yep, in the special liveried Red Bull. Really like the special American livery they've got. Lots of cars coming out of the pit lane. So hopefully for Verstappen doesn't have to contend with traffic. And no, not really so far, which is good. As he now enters the first sector properly, the S's, and the Red Bull, no surprise, on rails. And the first sector is 0.3 of a second pretty much quicker than Sainz. What a first sector from Verstappen. And already, I get the feeling this is going to be a low 135. And this will obviously easily get him into Q2. As he's going to get a decent slipstream from a Haas ahead. Don't know which Haas it is. And that Haas pulls out of the way. I think it's Magnussen. As Verstappen, his middle sector is not that great. 0.5 better than Sainz. So the Red Bull, not too great through the middle sector. Let's see how the final sector is. The final sector should be a lot better for the Red Bull. As Sergio Perez is on a possibly improved lap. He's not improved his middle sector, but he did improve the first sector. As Verstappen through the final two corners. And does he go quickest? Yes, he does, by what a final sector. Half a second quicker in the end than Carlos Sainz. And that final sector was 3.5 better than Sainz, as Perez goes up to third. Surely both Red Bulls are through to Q2. So here is Lewis Hamilton on the back straight. He's improved his first sector. He's in 12th place. This needs to be an improved lap. As all bit of understeer through there through turn 12. Very good middle sector, though. 3.5 quicker than Verstappen. Unbelievable middle sector. Can he keep that up in the final sector? As Albon is looking very strong on his lap so far compared to Tsunoda. In 15th, who is the driver at risk. As Hamilton into the final two corners. As he bumps his way through them. And does he go quickest? Yes, he does, by 1/4 of a second. Lewis Hamilton goes P1 on a 1:35.0. Alex Albon goes up to 8th place. Let me just update that quickly. So Albon up to 8th as Q1. The timer is up. These will be, of course, the final laps. Russell goes only 7th. Logan Sargent improves up to 14th, but I don't think that'll be enough to get him into Q2. As Lando Norris goes 2nd for McLaren. And here comes Zhou. Oh, no, this isn't Zhou. That's a Haas. Here comes Zhou, who goes up to 6th. What an improvement by the Alfa Romeo driver. Zhou is up to 6th place. Leclerc stays in 7th. Here comes Ricciardo, who is currently in last place. He now goes up to 10th. Not sure if that'll be enough. We'll find out. Kevin Magnussen up to 6th. That surely will be enough for him. And then you've got... who else is improved? Tsunoda is up to 5th for AlphaTauri. So he's looking good. As Piastri into Q2 in 10th place. Alonso is in 20th and is still on a lap, so we'll see if he can get his way into Q2. Ocon goes 12th. Valtteri Bottas is up to 11th. Here comes Alonso, and Alonso's out! Fernando Alonso, only 17th, and Stroll is out as well. Oh my goodness. That is an absolute shocker. Alonso in 17th and Stroll only 19th. And those brake issues have cost them dearly in practice one. So, and Hulkenberg also out. What a poor end for Hulkenberg. I don't think he improved his final lap. So, let me just quickly read off the final order of Q1. These are the drivers on their way into Q2. Hamilton, Norris, Verstappen, Sainz, Tsunoda, Perez, Magnussen, Zhou, Leclerc, Piastri, Bottas, Ocon, Gasly, Russell, and then Ricciardo. And knocked out in Q1, guys, Nico Hulkenberg, Fernando Alonso, Alex Albon, Lance Stroll, and Logan Sargent. And we know this season they have dropped off a lot and they have really struggled in the second half of the season. But that, you know, in looking at their fall through the season, that is rock bottom right there. And I know it was, you know, the reliability issues probably in practice one which really caused this to happen, but still, poor performance by Aston Martin. And yeah, my expectations of Aston Martin to be, you know, decently quick and be competitive and maybe be there with Mercedes and Ferrari, been proven to be bullshit. But again, there are understandable reasons for that. Again, the lack of running they got in practice one, I think, is the main cause for that, like it was for Alpine in Baku in another sprint weekend this season. So yeah, I don't think, you know, if Aston Martin had not had those front brake issues in practice one, I don't think that would have happened there. I think they would have made, or they would have got at least one car into Q2. But the fact is they are out. And we've got what? Obviously, both Mercedes, both Red Bulls, both Ferraris, both McLarens. They're into Q2. We've got both Alpha Tauris, which is good. Both Alpines, both Alfa Romeos, which I'm surprised by. And very good lap, I have to say again, from Zhou to get up to 8th place in Q1. Really needed that. And then what we've got, one Haas in Q2, and yeah, not a good end to the session there for Hulkenberg, which I don't think, again, necessarily because of a lack of pace. I think with Hulkenberg, he did not improve his final lap, and that's why he dropped down to 16th place. Because of course he was up at one point in like 4th place. So yeah, he just he didn't deliver when it mattered. And that's what happens when you don't deliver. And Aston Martin telling Alonso, stay in the car, Fernando. We're just keeping an eye on the track limits for everyone else. That's just hopium, though, for Aston Martin. Because even if someone had the time deleted, they wouldn't be promoted into Q2. Hulkenberg would. As they're just showing on Sky F1 a replay of all the smoke that came out of the Aston Martin brakes when they did that pit stop. And yeah, clearly, I think Fernando said it after practice one that they have underestimated the heat here this weekend, and that's why they're suffering with that. Yeah, their weekend is now properly compromised, but it will at least be fun to watch Fernando come through the field as Anthony Davidson just showing a replay as well of the two Mercedes struggling with the rear end of the car on turn-in to a couple corners, turn 1 and turn 19 in particular. But in this session, Q2, and I just remembered, I need to get that dotted line put out. So let me just get that put in position. There you go. You'd imagine the two Alfa Romeos will be knocked out in Q2. Be very surprised if Alfa Romeo get into Q3 again like they did in Qatar. Alpine, they're going to be very tight, I think they are, in terms of making it into Q3. Obviously, the big one to look out for in the midfield is Magnussen in the updated Haas. As the session has started, with 30 seconds in, I'll sync up the time at the 14-minute mark. But also, keep an eye out for AlphaTauri. Obviously, Yuki Tsunoda ended up in 5th. Yeah, we could see a couple surprise entries to Q3. As I think we are looking at the Haas coming out onto the track. And there you go. 14 minutes left in Q2. Looney Classics says Chazza has been making some wild predictions lately, really wild. I don't think I have. I think you're probably being hyperbolic with that statement. I don't think I've been making wild predictions. Like I said, for the podium positions and stuff like that, I think I've been, in the last few races, I think I've been more so correct than not. So, yeah. And obviously, it depends what predictions you're looking at, because obviously I do my initial predictions for the weekend, and then I amend them through the weekend into my final ones. So, depends which ones you're, that you're talking about. But yeah, let's get into this session. As here is the Ferrari of Leclerc, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. As Sargent and Alonso are walking to the FIA garage to get themselves weighed. As out comes Sergio Perez, who, of course, did not make it into Q3 in Qatar. Has to do so today. And he just slowly comes out onto track behind, I think, an Alpine or a Mercedes. I'm not quite sure. As here comes Leclerc through turn 1. And Leclerc, of course, is the qualifying specialist, but he's never had pole position, Leclerc, at this track. And I don't think he's even started on the front row here before as Leclerc. I think the highest he's started on the grid here was 4th in 2019, I think, or in 2021. So it's not been a great Grand Prix event. Of course, last year's teammate took pole position. Not Sainz. Leclerc did end up 2nd, but he had a grid penalty, which is why he didn't start 2nd. As Leclerc bounces his way into turn 12 at the end of the back straight. Slight understeer, but the middle sector is pretty good. Whether it's good compared to the others, we'll find out in a moment. The best time in Q1 was a 1:35.0. So, yeah. Let's see how quick Ferrari can go, as Sainz is not too far behind Leclerc. Also doing a lap as the rear end of the Ferrari bit all over the place in the penultimate corner. And Leclerc now onto the start-finish straight and to the 1:35.8, which is certainly not a quick lap. So Leclerc quickest for now. Here comes Carlos Sainz, who goes 0.4 of a second, nearly slower. Yeah, not a good start there for Ferrari. And now we look at Max Verstappen as Hamilton now goes quickest on a 1:35.7. The reason they're going slower could quite possibly, and most probably, is because they're on used tyres, as Russell goes quickest and goes a couple hundredths of a second exactly quicker than Lewis Hamilton. Piastri now goes quickest on a 1:35.5. But here comes Max Verstappen, who has so far not done a purple sector. Pierre Gasly has, though, done a purple first sector, as Max Verstappen goes quickest by about a tenth of a second. As Magnussen is up to 6th. Zhou goes 7th. Bottas is now 6th for Alfa Romeo. As here comes Pierre Gasly, who goes 3rd. Only a tenth and a half down, or a tenth and a quarter actually down on Max. That's a very good first lap. That's Verstappen, Piastri, Gasly, Russell, Hamilton, Leclerc, Bottas, Ricciardo goes up to 8th. And now it's Magnussen 9th, Zhou 10th. As actually Zhou now 11th, because Tsunoda goes up to 6th. Both AlphaTauris in the top 10 for the moment. And then in the drop zone, you've got Zhou and Sainz, Norris, Perez and Ocon are about to do their laps. Ocon goes now up to 3rd place. Alpine looking very good so far. As Perez only 5th, he goes slower than both Alpines. That is quite the surprise. And Lando Norris now is the final driver to do a time. And he is out there. Just don't know where exactly he is. But in the drop zone is Ricciardo, Magnussen, Zhou and Sainz and Norris. And Lando has come into the pits, so clearly has made some sort of mistake out there. So with 8 minutes to go in Q2, on their way into Q3 is Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri, Esteban Ocon, Pierre Gasly, Sergio Perez, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Yuki Tsunoda, Charles Leclerc and Valtteri Bottas as Sainz. A bit distracted, maybe blocked to a degree by Tsunoda on his flying lap, which they were just showing there, which is why he was not very quick on that lap. But he will get the chance to improve. As Lando Norris back in to the garage. So he'll have to hope there's not a yellow or a red flag in the final couple minutes. But Alpine, very surprising. I mean, we saw in Qatar they had a good weekend. Ocon finishing in 7th. And remember, they qualified on the Friday 7th and 8th. So they had a strong weekend, really. But, I did not expect them to keep that up here. I thought I didn't think they'd be terrible, but I thought there would be a drop-off. Because you don't need... And Alpine's main strength is tracks that require more downforce than top speed. This track does require a bit more top speed because of the long back straight. So I thought Alpine probably will drop off a tad, but just not massively. But this is very impressive. As Tsunoda back in the garage. Also, shout out to him in the top 10 in 8th place. And there is only half a second or 4.5 tenths covering the top 10. So it is very close here in qualifying, which is just how we like it. And of course, there will be one final run coming up in a few minutes. Vince says I'm looking for Hamilton to have a good weekend here. Yeah, it would be good if he could. He's not had Hamilton a proper good weekend in terms of qualifying and the race, really. I mean, Japan, you could say, yeah, but it wasn't by any means great. I thought probably the last great weekend he had was probably in Hungary, where, of course, he started on pole. As that is why Lando Norris has not got a lap time, because he made a mistake at turn 19, went too wide, and had his time deleted. The time he did, though, was a 1:35.9, which I don't think would be good enough for him to be in the top 10 currently. I think that time would have put him in 11th place. So, yeah. As the tyre blankets come off, and clearly they're going to send Lando out earlier rather than later to make sure he avoids any yellow or red flags hampering his Q2. As a good amount of McLaren fans in the grandstands. And out comes the Red Bull of Max Verstappen, who is currently quickest. And yeah, the best time in Q1 was a 35.0. So I am expecting a big improvement of lap time from basically everyone. Because Verstappen's about, half a second off compared to the best time in Q1. So yeah, expect lots of improvement as we are looking at the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc in 9th place. Or was that Leclerc? Yeah, it was. Because we're now looking at, I believe, Carlos Sainz, who is 14th. And I think both Ferrari drivers should be fine to get through to the top 10, but as we saw in Qatar, nothing is ever settled, as of course Sainz fell foul of the cut-off zone a couple weeks ago, as Leclerc starts his final lap in Q2, as the car darts around, and no idea what his first sector is like, because they're not showing the sector times, which is really annoying. He now comes through the end of the S's section, and now through turn 10, down to the hairpin of turn 11, which is a corner that you could overtake into, but typically cars don't tend to be close enough to the car ahead to overtake into that corner, unless it's the first lap. As Carlos Sainz is in a purple first sector, Leclerc passes a slow car into turn 12. And Leclerc's middle sector is good. It's a purple middle sector. And this might just put him quickest. Probably going to put him second quickest, I'd imagine. As he exits now turn 15 with now 2 minutes to go in Q2. Can Ferrari get both cars into Q3? As Sainz is on a good lap, but not as good as, I don't think, as Leclerc. As Leclerc comes to the line, and he does. What a final sector. Half a second quicker he goes than Verstappen onto a 1:35.004. And he is quickest. That definitely will be good enough. And here is his teammate Carlos Sainz. Slight bit of understeer in the final corner. But he does a 1:35.3, which might be good enough. We'll have to find out. So Sainz is second now. But now everyone else is going to do their final run. So they are probably going to drop down. At least Carlos Sainz will. As we're looking at Zhou here in 14th place. Who's not been in Q3, I don't think, since that amazing performance in Hungary, unless I'm incorrect. And Zhou is now into the middle sector and he's up on Bottas, but it was not a personal best middle sector. It'd have to be an amazing final sector from him as Lando Norris goes 4th which is not as quick as I expected him to go. And that's actually not as quick as lap time as he did in Q1. So he might be in a bit of trouble as Magnussen, only 12th. Magnussen is out. Haas, they've not improved so far from that upgrade. Here comes Zhou, who goes up to 9th for Alfa Romeo. So checkered flag now falls. These are the final laps now as Lewis Hamilton's on a good lap. Tsunoda is up to 9th. Both Mercedes into the drop zone for the moment. Valtteri Bottas only goes 13th. So Zhou has outqualified him as Lewis Hamilton is on a good lap. But Russell is slightly down on Zhou after the first two sectors. So Russell could be heading out of Q2 as Hamilton, not a great final corner, but to the line he comes and he goes 3rd. Does Lewis Hamilton. And George Russell just behind. Can he make it through to Q3? Yes, he can. He goes up to 9th. There's now Sergio Perez, the driver, at risk. Daniel Ricciardo drops to 15th. I don't know if Ricciardo is on a lap or not. As here comes Ocon, who goes 5th. So both Alpines comfortably into Q3. And I think that is it for Q2. And Sergio Perez, by 0.018 of a second, has made it into Q3. Which I know you may think isn't a great performance by him, but he only had to use really one set of tyres. So that is an advantage for the rest of the weekend. As Verstappen at the end there went up to 2nd. And yeah, all the rest is correct. So that's Q2 done with. Through to Q3, and the shootout is Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, Carlos Sainz, Lewis Hamilton, Esteban Ocon, Lando Norris, Pierre Gasly, Oscar Piastri, George Russell and Sergio Perez. And knockdown Q2, Yuki Tsunoda, Zhou Guanyu, Valtteri Bottas, Kevin Magnussen and Daniel Ricciardo. And Ricciardo will be very disappointed with 15th when his teammate almost got into Q3 in 11th place. But yeah, Q3 will be underway in about 5 minutes' time. And of course, it'll be a 12-minute long session. So we'll get to that soon enough. But before, guys, we get into the third and final part of qualifying, let me just quickly touch on my next two pieces of content and what's coming up for the rest of the weekend on the channel. So here is the next two pieces of content on the channel. Tomorrow night, I'll be live at 9:30 p.m. UK time for the sprint race watch along. An hour and a half's build up it will be for the sprint race. 11 p.m. is when the sprint race will begin. And then I'll be live, obviously, for the race and then a reaction. And then on Sunday, I'll be live from 6 p.m. UK time, 2 hours before the race starts until 10 p.m. for the race preview and race watch-alongs. So don't forget to join us for that on Saturday and Sunday evening. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. Of course, we do qualifying and race watch-alongs for every Grand Prix. And for everybody watching, make sure to smash the like button. We are currently on 49 likes. Let's try and get up to 60 plus likes if we can in the next, say, 15-20 minutes. That'd be good if we could do that. But let me know, guys, who do you think gets pole? I still think Verstappen, but it doesn't feel like he's got as big of a gap over the rest of the field as I expected. So yeah, let me know. Who do you think gets pole position? And who do you think the main competitors will be? Will it be Leclerc and Hamilton? Will Norris pop up there? Will Russell improve? How will Alpine do? Let me know in the chat quickly. But yeah, Q3 underway in a few moments' time. As Sky F1 is just showing Lance Stroll doing an interview. An interview that will be a lot less shitty than the one he did in Qatar. Mickey saying Russell seems slow for some reason. Yeah, doesn't seem to be very on it, which is troubling, I have to say. And Josiah says Lewis is going to get pole. McLaren F1 Race says Lewis will pull out a blinder of a lap. I live in hope. Pranks 69 likes. Come on, people. Yeah, we're another, 11 likes away from that? So, yeah, let's try. We can to get to that. And, yeah, Crystal Racing pointing out that, yeah, Hamilton and Mercedes look genuinely, and especially in the middle sector, very quick. Will this be the second race of 2023 where Lewis Hamilton takes pole position? It would be amazing if he could. It would make the race on Sunday more interesting, no doubt about that. But still, likely that it will be a Verstappen pole position. And I do feel like McLaren will improve. Do remember that Oscar Piastri did not do a final time at the end of Q2, so Piastri definitely could have gone quicker at the end there. So McLaren are still in the fight. Maybe just not looking as competitive as we expected. It is harder to predict, really, a sprint weekend, but yeah. Of course, I will try and give the best educated, predictions I can for each race weekend, but, the more we're surprised, the better. That's what we want at the end of the day. Be boring as hell if 80% of what happened every weekend you predicted to happen. As the fans packed in the grandstands, decent attendance, actually more than decent, a good attendance considering it's a Friday. Obviously a work day, and it's nearly 5 p.m. local time. So yeah, very good attendance. And of course, tomorrow and Sunday it will be very, very well attended. As on Sky F1, sorry, they're just showing a replay of Russell possibly making a mistake, getting blocked. Not quite sure. Can't really see any mistakes that Russell is making. But, or maybe he's just pointing out how drivers can get distracted by cars ahead that are slowing down to let you through, which can happen. As Q3 has begun and the cars now begin to filter onto the track, I'll sync up the timer at the 11-minute mark, which is in about 45 seconds time. As Leclerc is now slowly coming out onto track. And yeah, Ferrari, I have to say, I am pleasantly surprised by so far. Let's hope they can keep that up. As Norris, Sainz, Piastri, and the Alpines coming out. But yeah, Verstappen is still my bet for pole. Then after that, you're looking at what? Leclerc, Hamilton, Norris, Piastri. Then we'll have to see, obviously, where Perez ends up. There you go. 11 minutes to go in qualifying. Again, remember with Perez, he ended up 10th in Q2, but he did not do a final time in Q2, so he could have gone quicker. As Perez and Hamilton now come out to the track a bit later than the others, which will give them a slight advantage of more rubber laid down, more grip. I am very interested, though, to see how Alpine do, because nobody coming here expected Alpine to be that competitive. We thought they'd be decent, middle of the road, really. That's where we expected, but nobody expected both cars comfortably getting through into Q3. And Alpine, they did bring a floor upgrade, I believe, in Qatar. And since then, they've looked quite a bit quicker than they were before, which is really good to see. As Max Verstappen begins his first attempt at pole position here in Texas. He had pole a couple years ago with an amazing lap he did in 2021. And this particular weekend in 2021 was absolutely crucial for him winning that championship. Not the most crucial moment, of course, but he absolutely had to win here to stop Hamilton getting too much momentum in those final few races to overtake him. As Verstappen has done a purple first sector, 10.5 better than Leclerc's first sector. As Max heading down to turn 12, there is a Mercedes ahead of him. I think of Hamilton, who is on his outlap. It is. And Max, oh, very good. Very, very good middle sector. This is a proper lap from Verstappen. And he's about to absolutely smash everyone on this Friday. As actually, no, Leclerc does a purple middle sector. So really competitive from Ferrari. McLaren with Norris absolutely nowhere near us. Here comes Verstappen now and goes quickest on a 1:35.0. But that time is not as good as what Leclerc did in Q2. It's a 1:35.081. When Leclerc did a 35.004. As here comes Leclerc now. Can he get onto provisional pole? Yes, he can. A 1:34.8. 2.5 tenths quicker than Verstappen as Norris goes third. So Ferrari on pole by a quarter of a second. Unbelievable speed from the Scuderia. Here comes Sainz. What can he do? He goes third on a 35.1. Norris, only a 35.7. Nowhere near for McLaren. Here comes Piastri, who also does a 35.7. McLaren, nowhere near. Yeah, absolutely nowhere near the fight. As we now look at George Russell, who's not really had a great day so far, with Esteban Ocon just going up to 6th place on a 1:35.9. As Russell comes through the final couple corners. Hamilton does a purple middle sector. Pierre Gasly goes 4th for Alpine, ahead of both McLarens, and he's only a 10th of a second away from Sainz. As here comes Russell, who only goes 5th. And we now see Sergio Perez to the line, who only goes 5th. What can Lewis Hamilton do for Mercedes-Benz? Round the final corner to the line. And it's second. He's half a tenth slower than Leclerc, but clearly that Mercedes has the pace to get pole position. 0.056 of a second he was away from pole, or provisional pole, but there is still 6 minutes and 15 seconds pretty much to go to secure pole. But what a top 10 we have got so far, as Russell has been dropped down to 10th for a track limit violation. So here is your top 10 going into the final run of qualifying. Charles Leclerc on pole, Lewis Hamilton second, Max Verstappen only third and a quarter of a second away from pole. Here's a replay of Verstappen at the final corner. And Max saying, well done, well fucking done. There, what the fuck was that in the last corner? And he's complaining about his teammate there. I'll be honest, looking at that, I don't think that cost him really any time at all. I think he's just That's just a typical racing driver excuse there. His lap just wasn't good enough. As, yeah, Russell, lap time deletion for him. So, yeah, Leclerc on provisional pole, Hamilton second, Max Verstappen only third, and a quarter of a second away from Leclerc. Going to have to be one mighty final lap if he's going to get pole. Because those 2 laps from Leclerc and Hamilton are really good. And then you've got Carlos Sainz 4th, Pierre Gasly up in 5th place for Alpine. What did he have for breakfast? Sergio Perez is 6th. He's definitely got to improve. Given where Verstappen is for the moment, Perez needs to at least be 5th, I would say. But let's see how they can improve in the final lap. And then you got Norris 7th, Piastri 8th, McLaren are nowhere compared to what we expected. And then Ocon is 9th. He should go a lot quicker. He's 0.7 of a second slower at the moment than Gasly. And then you got Russell in 10th, having had his lap time deleted. And this is exactly what we want. A proper fight for pole position between not only two drivers from 2 different teams, but even better, we've got 3 different teams fighting for pole. Leclerc for Ferrari, Hamilton for Mercedes, and Verstappen for Red Bull. And here's a replay of Russell at turn 9. If that's what his lap time was deleted for, I don't think he actually extended the track limits there. That looked fine to me. So, yeah, surprised if that's actually what it was deleted for. But, yeah, I am expecting as well a big improvement from McLaren. I am sure they can do better. Because remember, again, Lando Norris in Q1, I think did a 135.0, 135.1. And if he did a 135.1 now, that would put him up in 4th, 5th place. So McLaren definitely can do better. At least on lap time. As we've got most cars on the track now. Hamilton, Gasly, Perez and Russell, though, are still in the pit lane. With 2 minutes, 45 seconds left. Sainz in 4th, who took pole last year. Given that Leclerc's on pole, Carlos needs to be really getting, 10th and a half away at worst from Leclerc's time. He's currently, what, a quarter of a second away, I think, is Sainz. So definitely, I think Sainz can do better. As Lewis Hamilton there, coming out on the track. And all the cars in the top 10 back out on the circuit. So here we go. 2 minutes to go. Can Max Verstappen still take pole position? It's the final sector, really, that needs to be improved. The middle sector, he was a 10th and a half down on Leclerc. But in the final sector, he was almost 0.3 of a second slower than Charles, as Leclerc has now begun his final attempt at securing pole position for the first time in America. Or for the first time here in Texas. Of course, he did take pole in Miami last year. As Leclerc through the middle sector. What's his first sector like? It's good. It's a 10th and a half up on his personal best. You can't really ask for too much more in that first sector. Oh, Verstappen into turn 1 on his final lap. He locked up and he went slightly too wide. It's not cost him a massive amount of time, but that might cost him in this first sector. We'll see what his first sector time is. And he is up on Leclerc, but it's not a personal best first sector. So we will see. As Leclerc, 0.2 up on his personal best in the middle sector. This is a brilliant final lap from Leclerc. And I did say earlier in the stream, we've not quite seen the real Charles Leclerc lately. This is the real Charles Leclerc. As he's now coming into the final sector, can he secure this pole? As he comes into the penultimate corner, runs slightly wide on the entry of turn 19. And into the final corner, that looks good as Max does a personal best middle sector. And Leclerc, a 34.7. Will that be good enough? As we now await Max Verstappen as Lando Norris goes second for McLaren. That is much better. As Verstappen, all very close to going over the track limits. There are sights, only goes fourth. Here comes Verstappen. Can he get pole? Yes, he can by 5 thousandths of a second. And a purple final sector. Max for now is on pole. We now look at Esteban Ocon on a lap as Piastri only goes 7th. That's a poor final lap as Ocon looking good. How will he do through this final corner? Looks okay. Comes to the line and goes 6th for Alpine. Puts himself ahead of Gasly, but Gasly is still out there. Hamilton has not done a personal best. Middle sector of Verstappen and has had his lap time deleted. He's down to 5th. I thought he might have gone too far wide in the penultimate corner. And he has. As Hamilton into the final 2 corners as Perez only goes 8th. Can Hamilton take pole for the first time in 5 years here in Texas? No, he cannot. It is only 3rd place. His teammate is the last man to come to the line. And Russell goes 5th and puts Verstappen down to 6th place. Red Bull have had an absolute shocker here in Austin. But Ferrari are back on pole here in Texas for the 2nd year in a row and for the first time since Singapore. And no Red Bull on the first 2 rows of the grid. What a race we're in for, guys, on Sunday. This is going to be a special weekend, hopefully. So let me go through your final order of qualifying and what is your grid for Sunday's race. As here's a replay quickly of and yet Verstappen only just went over the white line. Very fine margins, but he did go over the white line. Yeah, with his front left tyre was the closest to staying in, but it did just go over. So, this is your grid for the United States Grand Prix on Sunday. Charles Leclerc will be on pole, and it's actually Leclerc's first pole since Baku. Lando Norris will be on the front row. What a final lap that is for him. Hamilton still 3rd. That's still a decent result. Carlos Sainz 4th. Russell 5th. Max Verstappen only 6th. What a difficult race that's going to be. Still has a good chance of winning, but going to have to be a really great performance for him to end up with the victory. Esteban Ocon ends up 7th. Pierre Gasly in 8th. What a result for Alpine, locking out the 4th row of the grid again. 2nd race in a row. Sergio Perez 9th. Absolute shocker from Perez. And Oscar Piastri, same for him. A shocking performance. And he only ends up in 10th. He just didn't improve enough on that final run. And ended up, I think, 0.6 of a second, if not more, slower than Norris. And then for the rest of the field, you've got Yuki Tsunoda 11th, Zhou Guanyu 12th, Valtteri Bottas 13th, Kevin Magnussen 14th, Daniel Ricciardo 15th, Nico Hulkenberg 16th, Alonso 17th, Albon 18th, Stroll 19th, and Sargent 20th. And what a grid we have for Sunday's Grand Prix. And I know some of you have been making fun of me in the chat, but all my predictions have been shit. But I don't care what any of you say, none of you predicted that grid. So, yeah. As the post-qualifying interviews just beginning now. Yeah, what a grid we have set up for Sunday. But I'm just going to start up a poll quickly to ask, who is your driver of the day for qualifying? And of course, there are many options for that. So, who is your driver of the day for qualifying at the 2023 US GP? And your options will be Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Lewis Hamilton, and the fourth option will be Esteban Ocon. I had to pick one Alpine driver, so I'm going to go with Ocon, obviously the driver who ended up quicker. So let me know who your driver of the day is for qualifying. For me, I'm going to go Leclerc. I'm going to go Leclerc because, I mean, again, last few races it's not been, you know, the Leclerc we all saw in 2022 where he was unbelievably quick despite Ferrari's you know, the team trying to, or not trying to, but hampering him. And this year's been a bit up and down, but that right there is proof that Leclerc has got the speed, he's got the skill. Ferrari just need to deliver a car that, you know, can do that on a consistent basis because the talent and the speed and the skill is all there. And yeah, Leclerc and Norris on the front row of a grid. I don't think we've ever had them on them two on the front row of a grid before. And then yeah, Hamilton and Sainz third and fourth, and then Russell and Verstappen fifth and sixth. What a front three rows of the grid we've got for Sunday's race. So yeah, let me know what your reaction is to qualifying here in Austin. I'm not going to be around super long, probably another, I don't know, probably 15 minutes maybe, max. So yeah, make sure to get your comments in if you can before the end of stream, and I'll try and find some comments, or not some comments. I'll try and find if there's any breaking news on Twitter to bring you from qualifying. And I have seen on Twitter that Fernando Alonso, his lap time he did, of course, Alonso ended up only 17th. That was he did a 1:36.2 with that lap time, which is 0.7 of a second slower than Lance Stroll did at this same Grand Prix last year, where if you remember Stroll, I think he qualified in like 7th place. So just further evidence of how they've regressed. But just trying to see what else, if there's anything else out there. And no, can't see anything. Yeah, let me know in the chat your thoughts from qualifying. Ricky says, how come Russell's first run time was deleted for track limits, but Max's final time wasn't deleted, and he was clearly more over track limits than Russell? Well, Max did have his final time deleted. But yeah, Russell's first run, from what I saw, it didn't look like he went over the white line, so I'm not quite sure about that. But I think the second lap time he did in Q3 was better than that one anyway, so I don't think in the end it matters. But yeah. Looney Classic says, Lewis left something out there. His middle sector was not as good as it should have been. Yeah. Yeah, the middle sector just not quite the best when he most needed it. What do you call it? Let me just see if I don't think I'll be able to see the sector time data. quite yet, but he ended up a tenth and a half from pole. If he had done a personal best middle sector, would it have been enough? It's too close to say. It could have been, but it also could not have been. It's a 50-50, really. So yeah. McLaren from Racing, please another winner Sunday other than Max. Yanni says Leclerc, of course, and number 2 Perez, who made Q3. Talking about driver of the day there. Let me see if I can find any other comments. I have noticed there's been a big drop off in viewers, and I think that's because of the timing of the session. So, yeah, I think I'm going to just read out a final couple comments and then bring the stream to a close. Obviously, the timing of the sessions this weekend are not great. Obviously, with the sprint race tomorrow being 11 p.m. on a Saturday night here in the UK, and obviously in, Europe, midnight, that's really not good. But, of course, they don't care because all they care about is marketing and twerking for America. So, who cares if we have to put up with poor timing? Aston missing Seb's feedback. I'm not sure that's necessarily what is causing their troubles. Say regardless, to be fair, Sainz was also solid. He was okay. I wouldn't say. I think solid maybe is a tad too good of a compliment. Julian Lawson saying glad Verstappen didn't take pole. Sudan says improvement for Mercedes. Yeah, absolutely. If Verstappen had kept that lap, he would have ended up on pole by 0.005 of a second. But you have to say, Mercedes, definitely with that upgrade, seemed to be closer to Red Bull. Ferrari, they've not brought an upgrade here, and they are just naturally closer. So clearly this track, at least over a single lap, is suiting their car well, and is not suiting McLaren that well. So, yeah, we've got a good, close, but also mixed up field this weekend, and should allow for a good weekend. But before I go, let me quickly read out the results of this poll. So there's been, 28 votes. I asked you guys who is driver of the day for qualifying at the 2023 US Grand Prix, and with 67% of the vote, you guys voted for Charles Leclerc, and then Norris second, Hamilton third, Ocon in fourth. Yeah, I totally agree. Leclerc was driver of the day. Brilliant lap, and hopefully has a good race on Sunday. Quick reminder of my content schedule for the next 2 days. I'll be back live tomorrow night at 9:30 p.m. UK time for the sprint race watch-along for the US Grand Prix. Live from 9:30 p.m. till midnight. And then live on Sunday night from 6 p.m. UK time all the way through till 10 p.m. for, of course, the main event, the race preview and race watch-along, where we get to see this exciting grid played out, and we get to see whether Red Bull will be stopped yet again in 2023. Well, not yet again, but, the last time they were stopped was actually not that long ago, obviously in Singapore, about 5-6 weeks ago. And we'll see if Ferrari, of course, can stop them once again. But thank you guys so much for coming along, even if it's been a bit of a difficult timing for you guys, depending on where you are in the world. Thank you for coming along. And yeah, before you go, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, because we do qualifying and race watch-alongs for every Grand Prix. What do you call it? Make sure to smash a like button before you go. Does help the channel in the algorithm. Let's try and get over 70 plus likes if we can. And if you want to keep up to date with the channel, make sure to follow me on Twitter. ChazzaHD is on Twitter. Great place for, for seeing when I'm going live and uploading videos and doing stuff like that. And also, you have the Discord server, link below in the description. It's another great place to keep up to date with my content and also channel updates as well. So those are all the places to go if you want to keep up to date with the channel. But guys, until my sprint race watch along tomorrow night at 9:30 p.m. UK time, that's an hour and a half before the sprint race begins, it has been me, ChazzaHD. Goodbye.